"Your curves drive me wild!" the towering mountain man bellowed across the dusty street, his voice cutting through the afternoon stillness as the graceful young woman hurried past with her medicine bundle, silencing every cruel whisper that had been trailing her steps. The townspeople saw her as nothing more than the mixed-blood girl, destined to lose her father's failing saloon within weeks, their mockery as predictable as the desert sun. But this bearded giant, who emerged from months in the wilderness, saw something they missed entirely: strength disguised as vulnerability, potential wrapped in worn calico. Hidden beneath the saloon's rotting floorboards lay documents that could transform the laughingstock into the town's most powerful landowner, if the railroad baron's men don't destroy the evidence first. Would her unlikely defender prove to be her salvation, or would his bold declaration only paint a larger target on her back? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The medicine bottle slipped from Eliza Jones's trembling fingers as another round of laughter erupted behind her. She knelt quickly in the dusty street of Sagebrush Creek, her worn calico dress gathering dirt as she scrambled to retrieve the precious quinine before it shattered completely. "Look at her crawling around like that," Mabel Lawson's voice carried clearly from the general store porch. "Just like her kind always do." Eliza's cheeks burned as she stood, clutching the bottle against her chest. The townspeople made no effort to hide their amusement. Mrs. Patterson whispered something to her companion that sent them both into fits of giggles. Even young Timothy Fletcher pointed openly before his mother swatted his hand down. She had grown accustomed to their cruelty over her 22 years, but today felt different, heavier. The eviction notice in her pocket seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, reminding her that she had less than 2 weeks to save everything. The Dusty Rose Saloon stood at the end of the street like a wounded animal. Paint peeled from its weathered boards, and one of the upstairs shutters hung at an awkward angle. Inside, her father Samuel lay bedridden, his former strength as a railroad worker now reduced to labored breathing and fevered mumblings. Eliza pushed through the saloon, his gaze. "Rest now, Papa. We'll manage." But they both knew the truth. 3 months of missed payments to Darius Thorne had sealed their fate. The rail baron owned half the businesses in town through debt, and the Dusty Rose would soon join his collection. The saloon's main room felt cavernous, with only 2 customers nursing their drinks in the corner. The piano sat silent, its keys yellow with age. Eliza wiped down tables that were already clean, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from wandering to their impossible situation. The doors swung open with unusual force, and every head turned toward the imposing figure filling the doorway. Jackson McGraw stood well over 6 feet, his broad shoulders blocking the afternoon sun. His dark beard was neatly trimmed despite months in the wilderness, and his clothes, though simple, were well made. He carried himself with quiet confidence that seemed to fill the entire room. "Whiskey," he said, settling at the bar with surprising grace for such a large man. Eliza poured his drink, acutely aware that the other customers had grown quiet. Jackson McGraw was something of a legend in Sagebrush Creek. He would disappear into the mountains for months at a time, returning with enough gold dust to live comfortably. Yet he chose to rent the same modest room above the blacksmith shop. "Much obliged." His voice was cultured, educated in a way that didn't match his mountain man appearance. Over the following days, Jackson became a regular presence at the Dusty Rose. He nursed his drink slowly, spoke little, but his eyes seemed to take in everything. When the roof began leaking during a brief storm, he appeared with tools and patched it without being asked. When the heavy beer barrels needed moving, he handled them as if they weighed nothing. Samuel grew strong enough to sit downstairs for short periods, and he watched Jackson with curious interest. "You remind me of someone," the old man said one evening. "Can't place who, but there's something familiar about you." Jackson's hand stilled on his glass for just a moment. "I get that sometimes." Darius Thorne arrived on a Tuesday morning like a storm cloud in an expensive suit. Knowing they're beaten. It's a shame when stubbornness leads to unnecessary suffering. After Thorne left, the saloon felt smaller somehow. Eliza sank into a chair, the weight of their situation pressing down on her shoulders. Samuel reached over to pat her hand with his own trembling fingers. "Your mother would be proud," he whispered. She never backed down from a fight either. Jackson had remained silent throughout the exchange, but something had shifted in his posture. His eyes followed Thorne's departure with an intensity that made Eliza wonder what thoughts were turning behind that weathered face. That night, as she locked up the saloon, Eliza noticed Jackson still sitting at his usual spot. The lamplight cast deep shadows across his features, making him look almost mystical. "Why do you stay here?" she found herself asking. "A man with your means could go anywhere." Jackson looked up, and for a moment his carefully guarded expression slipped. "Maybe I'm still looking for something worth staying for." The town meeting buzzed with anticipation as Darius Thorne strode to the front of the cramped courthouse. His polished boots clicked against the wooden floor with military precision. Mayor Pike scrambled to keep up, his round face already glistening with nervous sweat. Eliza sat in the back row, acutely aware of the whispers surrounding her. Jackson occupied the seat beside her, his presence both comforting and conspicuous. Samuel had insisted on attending, despite his weakness, his thin frame propped up by extra cushions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne's voice commanded instant silence. "We stand at a crossroads of progress. The railroad expansion will bring prosperity to Sagebrush Creek, but certain obstacles remain." His pale eyes found Eliza across the crowded room. "Some property owners refuse to embrace progress. They cling to failing businesses that contribute nothing to our community's future." Mabel Lawson nodded vigorously from the front row. "That saloon has been nothing but trouble. Time someone said it. The Jones property sits directly in the path of our proposed depot," Thorne continued. "Without it, the entire project cruel amusement." Eliza watched her father's shoulders slump in defeat, and something inside her chest shattered. She stood slowly, her legs trembling beneath her worn dress. Every eye in the room fixed on her slight frame. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. "Mr. Thorne is right about one thing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is about progress." Jackson's hand found her elbow, steadying her. His touch sent warmth through her entire body, giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. "Some of us believe in building something better," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Others believe in tearing down what doesn't serve their purposes." "Big words from someone who can't pay her bills," Thorne snapped. "You have nothing, girl." "No money, no prospects, no future in this town. She has more than you think." Jackson's voice cut through the room like thunder. He rose to his full height, and the courthouse suddenly felt smaller. His calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by something that made even Thorne take a step backward. "And what exactly does she have?" Thorne recovered quickly, his businessman's instincts sensing weakness. "A broken-down saloon? A dying father? The charity of drifters?" Jackson reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a leather portfolio. The courthouse held its collective breath as he opened it with deliberate care. Bank documents emerged first, followed by property deeds, then correspondence bearing official seals. "She has a partner," Jackson said quietly. "Someone who believes in her vision." Mayor Pike squinted at the papers Jackson laid on the podium. His face went white as parchment. "These are from the Denver Territorial Bank. Account balance of $50,000. The courthouse exploded in shocked whispers. Thorne snatched the documents, his eyes scanning frantically. His confident expression crumbled with each line he read. "Jackson McGraw Beaumont," he read aloud, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Sole heir to the Beaumont Mining Consortium." Eliza stared at Jackson as if seeing him for the first time. The rough mountain man facade hadn't changed, but everything else about him suddenly made sense. The educated speech, the quality. "I've seen enough legal papers to recognize authenticity." Jackson addressed the room with quiet authority. "Miss Jones and I are forming a business partnership. The Dusty Rose Saloon will be expanded into a proper hotel. Construction begins next week." "With what workers?" Thorne sputtered. "I control the labor contracts in this town. I've already hired a crew from Denver. They arrive tomorrow." Eliza watched in amazement as the same people who had laughed at her minutes earlier now studied her with newfound respect. The transformation was swift and complete. Money, it seemed, had the power to change everything. But Jackson wasn't finished. He turned to face Thorne directly, and his next words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "The railroad will still get built, Mr. Thorne, but it will be built on fair terms, with fair compensation, and fair treatment for everyone involved." Thorne's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. For the first time in years, someone had challenged his authority publicly and won. Jackson extended his arm to Eliza, and she took it without hesitation. Together, they walked through the silent courthouse toward the door. Behind them, the whispers began again, but now they carried a very different tone. The hammering started at dawn. Jackson's Denver crew worked with efficient precision, their skilled hands transforming the Dusty Rose from eyesore to promise. Eliza moved among them with newfound confidence, her natural head for numbers evident as she coordinated supplies and schedules. "The foundation needs reinforcement here," she pointed to the saloon's eastern wall. "Winter floods always hit that corner hardest." The foreman nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking, miss. Most folks don't consider seasonal damage." Eliza felt a flush of pride at the recognition. For the first time in her life, men listened to her ideas without mockery or dismissal. The feeling was intoxicating. Jackson watched from across the construction site, his expression unreadable. He had thrown himself into the project with surprising intensity, working alongside the hired crew despite his wealth. His hands bore fresh calluses from handling lumber and tools. "You don't have to do manual labor," Eliza said during a brief break. "You're paying these men well enough." Two men Eliza didn't recognize, their faces bearing the hard lines of professional intimidators. "Quite the operation you have here." Thorne surveyed the construction with obvious displeasure. "I trust all permits are in order." "Filed with the territorial office yesterday," Jackson answered without looking up from his work. "How thorough?" Thorne's smile never reached his eyes. "I've done some research on you, Mr. McGraw Beaumont. Fascinating background. Eastern education, mining fortune, society connections." He paused dramatically, ensuring every worker could hear his next words. "Tell me, what does a man of your breeding want with frontier life? Some kind of adventure story you can share at dinner parties back east?" Several workers glanced up from their tasks. Eliza felt tension ripple through the construction site like electricity before a storm. "I want what every man wants," Jackson said quietly. "A life worth living." "How noble!" Thorne's voice dripped with sarcasm. Playing at being common folk must be thrilling for someone of your background. But what happens when the game gets boring? When real hardship replaces your romantic notions? Eliza watched Jackson's jaw tighten. Something about Thorne's words had struck a nerve. "You think this is a game?" Jackson finally looked up from his work. "I think you're a rich boy playing dress-up in the wilderness. When things get difficult, you'll run back to your comfortable life and leave these people to face the consequences." The words hung in the air like poison. Eliza saw doubt creep into some of the workers' faces. Even Samuel shifted uncomfortably on the porch. Jackson set down his hammer with deliberate care. "You want to know why I left my family's money? Why I chose this life? By all means, enlighten us. Because I spent 25 years watching men like you destroy everything decent in pursuit of profit. I watched my own father crush small businesses to expand his empire. I saw what money without conscience could do to communities like this one." Jackson's voice carried across the construction site with quiet force. "I didn't come here to play at being poor. I came here because I was tired of being rich and empty." Pretty speeches don't change. Eliza rushed to his side, her hands shaking as she checked his pulse. "Papa!" His skin felt clammy and cold. His breathing came in shallow gasps. "He needs a doctor." Jackson was beside her instantly, his strong hands lifting Samuel with surprising gentleness. "The nearest physician is in Cedar Falls, 3 hours by wagon." "He won't survive the trip," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, he will." Jackson's voice carried absolute certainty. "I'll take him to Denver. There's a specialist there who can help." "Denver's a 2-day journey. The expense alone." "Let me worry about that." Thorne watched the scene unfold with obvious satisfaction. Reality has a way of intruding on fairy tales, doesn't it? Medical bills, travel costs, lost construction time. How quickly your partner's fortune will disappear. Jackson ignored him completely, focused entirely on Samuel's labored breathing. "Get his warmest clothes. We leave within the hour." As Jackson carried Samuel toward the stable, Eliza felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The construction crew watched uncertainly, waiting for direction. Thorne's men had moved closer to the building site, their intentions clear. "What are your orders, miss?" the foreman asked. Eliza looked at the half-finished hotel, then at Thorne's expectant face, then at Jackson, disappearing into the stable with her dying father. Everything she had worked for hung in the balance. "Keep building," she said firmly. "No matter what happens, we finish this project." Thorne's smile was sharp as a blade. "Brave words, girl. Let's see how brave you feel when you're facing the future alone." The wagon wheels disappeared into a cloud of dust, taking Jackson and Samuel toward an uncertain future in Denver. Eliza stood alone in the construction site, watching until the last trace of them vanished beyond the hills. The hammering had stopped. 20 workers waited for her next command. "Back to work," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We have a hotel to build." The foreman scratched his beard uncertainly, uncomfortable. "Someone's poisoning the well," the foreman told Eliza privately. "My boys are getting pressure from all sides." "Can you hold them together?" "For now. But if that railroad man keeps squeezing, some might take work elsewhere." Eliza nodded grimly. Thorne's strategy was becoming clear. He didn't need to attack her directly. He just had to make everyone else's life difficult until they abandoned her cause. That evening, she climbed to the saloon's second floor, where her father's empty room felt cavernous. The silence pressed against her ears like water. She had never realized how much comfort Samuel's presence provided until it was gone. The wooden floorboards creaked as she paced, her mind racing through calculations that never balanced properly. Food, wages, materials, medicine for Samuel when he returned. The numbers blurred together into an impossible equation. Her foot caught on a loose board near the window. She knelt to examine the damage, running her fingers along the warped wood. The board lifted easily, revealing a dark space beneath. Her heart jumped as she realized this wasn't accidental damage. This was a hiding place. She lowered her hand into the gap and felt something smooth and rectangular. A book, bound in faded leather, emerged first, followed by a small metal box that rattled with hidden contents. Her mother's belongings, hidden for over 2 decades. The diary's pages were yellowed, but legible in the lamplight. Rose's handwriting flowed across the paper in elegant loops, recording daily events that seemed ordinary at first glance. Washing, cooking, serving customers in the saloon. But certain entries made Eliza's breath catch in her throat. Helped 3 travelers reach the next station safely. The conductors say the route north is clear for now. Samuel grows suspicious of my nighttime activities. I must be more careful with the signals. The Beaumont family sends word that Rose is officially dead. My new life can truly begin. Eliza's hands trembled as the truth revealed itself page by page. Her mother had been Rose Beaumont before becoming Rose Jones. She had faked her death. Convenient clerical errors. The rail baron had been systematically erasing her mother's legal claim to the property for years. A knock at the door made her jump. She quickly gathered the papers and diary, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Miss Jones?" The foreman's voice carried worry. "We got problems downstairs." She descended to find 3 of Thorne's men standing in her saloon. They wore badges that looked official enough to fool most people, though she suspected they were as fake as their authority. "Building inspection," the leader announced, producing a clipboard covered in official-looking forms. "Multiple violations reported." By whom? Anonymous complaints. Very serious allegations about unsafe construction practices. They moved through the building like locusts, pointing out imaginary problems and scribbling notes designed to intimidate. The construction crew gathered in the saloon's main room, their faces grim with understanding. This was harassment dressed up as law enforcement. "I'm shutting you down until these violations are corrected," the fake inspector announced. "Could take weeks to get proper permits filed." "You have no authority here." "I have territorial backing, miss. You want to challenge that in court, be my guest." Course, legal proceedings could take months, maybe years. The threat was clear. Fight them and lose everything to legal fees and delays. Submit and lose everything to Thorne's manipulation. Either way, she lost. After they left, the construction crew stood around uncertainly. Some had already started gathering their tools, recognizing the writing on the wall. The foreman approached her with obvious reluctance. "Miss, my boys need steady work, if this project's getting shut down." "Give me until tomorrow," Eliza said. "I might have a solution." Alone again, she spread her mother's documents across a table and began to read by lamplight. Somewhere in these papers lay the key to everything. Her mother had been smart enough to outwit a wealthy family and establish a new identity. Surely she had been smart enough to protect her daughter's inheritance. The answer was there, waiting in faded ink and careful planning. Eliza just had to be brave enough to claim it. The wagon appeared on the horizon just as the afternoon worked. "Best doctor's money can buy," Samuel said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. Jackson wouldn't accept anything less. She led them toward the saloon, acutely aware of how much the construction had progressed despite Thorne's interference. Her makeshift crew of local women and sympathetic townspeople had worked around the fake inspectors, making repairs and improvements during evening hours when official eyes weren't watching. "The workers?" Jackson asked, noticing the absence of his Denver crew. Thorne scared most of them off. But I found alternatives. Inside the saloon, she had arranged the documents on a large table like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. Samuel's face went white as parchment when he saw the familiar handwriting spread across the wooden surface. "Rose's diary," he whispered, sinking into a chair. "I thought it was lost in the fire." "What fire?" Eliza asked. Jackson studied the legal papers with growing amazement. His educated eyes quickly grasped their significance. "These property deeds predate any claims Thorne might have. Your mother owned this entire block legally." "She was Rose Beaumont," Samuel said quietly, his voice heavy with secrets finally being revealed. "Jackson, she was your father's sister." The revelation hit Jackson like a physical blow. He stared at Samuel, then at Eliza, then back at the documents. "My Aunt Rose died when I was 12. The family said she drowned in a boating accident. She faked her death to escape an arranged marriage your grandfather had planned. She came west and used her inheritance to buy this land, then started helping escaped slaves reach freedom through the Underground Railroad." Eliza watched Jackson's face as the family connection sank in. "That makes us cousins by marriage." "Distant cousins," Jackson corrected, his lawyer's training evident. "More importantly, it makes you the rightful heir to property worth far more than anyone realized." Samuel's hands shook as he opened the diary to a specific page. She wrote everything down. Every transaction, every legal document, every person she helped to freedom. She knew someone would try to steal what she had built. Thorne has been systematically removing here 2 weeks ago. He was right. During his absence, she had discovered reserves of courage and intelligence she never knew existed. Managing the construction project, handling Thorne's harassment, uncovering her mother's secrets. Each challenge had revealed new strengths. "There's something else," Samuel said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Rose wasn't just helping escaped slaves. She was documenting everything. Names, dates, routes. If that information fell into the wrong hands." "Where is it?" Jackson asked. Samuel pointed to a loose stone in the saloon's fireplace. "She built a hiding place behind there. Said it would protect the people she helped, even after she was gone." Jackson carefully removed the stone, revealing a metal box wrapped in oiled cloth. Inside were dozens of letters, maps, and detailed records of Underground Railroad operations. The historical significance was staggering. "This proves the saloon was a legitimate station," Eliza breathed. "Mother wasn't just running a business. She was running a rescue operation." "More than that," Jackson said, studying a particular document. "This letter is from the territorial governor, thanking Rose for her service and promising legal protection for her property. It's signed and sealed with the official territorial stamp. The implications were enormous. Rose's work had official recognition at the highest levels of territorial government. Any attempt to seize her property would be seen as an attack on sanctioned humanitarian efforts." "Thorne doesn't know about this," Samuel said. "He thinks he only has to worry about business records and property deeds." Eliza felt pieces clicking into place, like a lock finally opening. "We don't just prove ownership. We prove legacy. We show the town what this place really represents." "The whole story," Jackson agreed. "Not just legal documents, but the moral authority behind them. They spent the evening organizing their evidence, planning their presentation, and preparing for what would likely be the most important town meeting in Sagebrush Creek's history. Outside, Thorne's men continued their patrols, unaware that their quarry had just discovered weapons far more powerful than money or intimidation. "Tomorrow changes everything," Eliza said as they finished their preparation. Theatrical precision, flanked by Mayor Pike and 2 territorial officials he had summoned from the capital. His confident smile suggested a man who believed he held all the winning cards. He had spent the morning filing additional legal challenges and bringing in outside authority to crush any resistance. Eliza entered through the back door, carrying a leather satchel that seemed to pulse with hidden power. Jackson walked beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. Samuel followed, moving slowly but with dignity restored. The crowd fell silent as they made their way to the front of the room. "This is highly irregular," Mayor Pike stammered, mopping sweat from his forehead. "Calling meetings without proper notice, bringing in outside agitators." "I'm calling this meeting as a property owner and citizen," Eliza said, her voice carrying to the back rows. "I have evidence that concerns every person in this room." Thorne's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "More delays and desperate theatrics. The territorial officials here have final authority to settle this matter permanently." One of the officials, a stern man with steel-gray hair, nodded gravely. "We've reviewed Mr. Thorne's documentation. The railroad expansion serves territorial interests. Individual property disputes cannot obstruct progress." Eliza opened her satchel and withdrew the diary, handling it like a sacred text. "Before you make final judgments, you should know the complete history of this property." "We know enough," Thorne interrupted. "A failing saloon owned by a family that can't pay its debts. The territorial government has no interest in subsidizing failure." "Then perhaps you'll be interested in subsidizing heroism." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Eliza opened the diary to a marked page and began reading in a clear, strong voice that reached every corner of the courthouse. April 15th, 1863. Helped 7 travelers reach the northern station safely. The conductors report increased patrols, but our signals remain secure. Samuel grows suspicious of my nighttime activities, but the cause demands sacrifice. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thorne's territorial official's stern expression had shifted to keen interest. "You're claiming this property was an official station." Samuel produced the governor's letter with trembling hands. "Official recognition and protection, signed by Territorial Governor Crawford himself." The official examined the document carefully, his legal training evident in how he studied the seal and signature. His face grew grave as the implications became clear. "This letter grants permanent territorial protection to this property and its operations." Thorne's face had gone white as parchment. "That document is decades old. It has no bearing on current railroad development." "On the contrary," the official replied coldly. "Territorial protection is permanent, unless specifically revoked by gubernatorial order. This property has legal immunity from seizure for any purpose." Eliza felt the power shift in the room like a physical presence. The same people who had mocked her weeks earlier now stared with growing respect and amazement. She wasn't just fighting for a failing business. She was protecting a monument to courage and sacrifice. "Furthermore," she continued, producing the property deeds, "my mother's legal ownership of this entire city block was systematically erased from territorial records through fraudulent means." Jackson handed additional documents to the official. We have correspondence proving deliberate alteration of legal filings, bribery of territorial clerks, and conspiracy to defraud a legal property owner. The official's expression grew thunderous as he reviewed the evidence. Mr. Thorne, these are serious allegations of territorial fraud. Lies and fabrications, Thorne sputtered, but his usual authority had evaporated. Desperate attempts to avoid legitimate debt collection. The documents appear authentic, the official said grimly. This matter requires immediate investigation by the Territorial Attorney General. Eliza stood before the same crowd that had laughed at her, but now she commanded their complete attention. This property will be developed, but it will be developed to honor its history and serve this community's needs. She outlined her vision for the Rose Heritage Hotel, as establishment that would preserve the Underground Railroad station while providing jobs and prosperity for Sagebrush Creek. The railroad would still wrung his hands, calculating how quickly he could distance himself from the collapsing conspiracy. Jackson found Eliza's hand and squeezed gently. Their partnership had evolved into something deeper during the crucible of the last few weeks. Respect had grown into admiration. Admiration into love built on equality and shared courage. As the courthouse emptied, people approached Eliza with apologies, job applications, and expressions of support. The woman they had dismissed as worthless now controlled their economic future, but she wielded that power with the same grace she had shown under persecution. 6 months later, the Rose Heritage Hotel opened to territorial acclaim. The beautifully restored building honored both its Underground Railroad history and its promise of future prosperity. Eliza and Jackson's partnership had become a marriage celebrated by the entire territory. In the hotel's lobby, a bronze plaque told the story of Rose Beaumont Jones, her courage, and her daughter's determination to claim a legacy written in dignity rather than gold.